Welcome to the second installment of the Robot Wars Retrospective, filled with incredible fights in the arena and in the court. Will Marc Thorpe be able to keep a low profile before he's men torn apart by men in suits? Let the retrospective begin! Robot Wars 1996 was a great success. Thorpe had just finished his third Robot Wars competition and the sport was as popular as ever. It seemed like absolutely nothing could go wrong. Except it does. It goes horribly, horribly wrong. Now, before I get really into the nitty-gritty, I must preface by saying that all the information regarding what I talk about in this video comes from the book Gearheads by Brad Stone. I recommend you buy a copy for yourselves and read it. Everything you hear about in this video is a slightly abridged and half-assed attempt to reword the information in that book. Brad Stone, if you see this, I am indebted to you. And please don't sue me. Steve Plotnicki, the man who ran Profile Records, infamous for housing one of the most historically important hip-hop groups in Run DMC, also infamous for getting into a legal battle with said group and winning. He was already a bit of a villain in the eyes of some, definitely through the eyes of Russell Simmons, Run's brother, and also his co-founder Corey Robbins, but that's another video altogether, one I'm definitely not going to make. He was essentially like any other capitalist, and had already had years of experience fighting other companies in courts and winning. It was almost like a sport for him. He would fund a business venture and started suing whenever they wanted to get a more lucrative deal elsewhere. He would brand himself as someone who stood up to the bigger companies, while simultaneously running one of the most successful labels of the 1980s. None of that even occurred to our main character, Marc Thorpe. He thought he would be working with Gary Pinney, who was apparently much friendlier. I asked Marc whether he had any ideas about Plotnicki's intentions and whether there were more obvious red flags, and this is what he had to say. Gary Pinney managed the business while I produced the events working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Gary would fly out here 2 weeks before helping me with the event. He and I worked well together. I was naive to Gary and Steve's intent to have me groom and develop the business and then take it from me, which fostered feelings of mutual mistrust after I figured it out. The lack of trust fueled my fear of loss of control, which I admit in these situations, control usually belongs to the one putting up the money. So the whole struggle really arose out of mutual mistrust. I really thought Gary would in effect be my partner and Steve would take a passing interest. While Marc thought of Robot Wars as a sport and an art form, Plotnicki thought of it as a property, something to make a TV show and a toy line from.
One thing that highlights the dynamic is this collision between personal and business. Steve used to say, it's just business, it's not personal. And over the years, as I thought about it, it couldn't be more personal.
Yeah.
In fact, the more personal it is, the better the business.
The joint partnership agreement that they signed, and very briefly mentioned in the last episode, was delineated at 50-50, meaning that one couldn't make a decision without the other. Big mistake. For the first 3 years of the agreement, nothing much happened. It seemed like the most that anyone had disagreed on was whether or not Blendo should be allowed to fight, and things of that nature. However, things would rapidly change after 1996. Profile's loans to Robot Wars had become larger and larger, and Plotnicki wanted a bigger share in the company. Thorpe hated that idea. This was his creation after all, and he wasn't exactly privy to the formula for financing startup businesses. He wanted to be at the forefront of any marketing decision made for Robot Wars. During Robot Wars 1995, Plotnicki did start to notice that while the events were happening, they weren't making a profit, and he felt like he was throwing money away at the idea. He also found out that Thorpe was being paid $1,000 a week by Profile, which wasn't in the joint venture agreement. Plotnicki used Gary Pinney as a middleman to put pressure on Thorpe, telling him, "You have to get outside employment. We can't keep paying you if no money is coming in." Thorpe wouldn't relieve ownership of the company, and Plotnicki didn't want to pour money into Robot Wars until he had majority control of the property. That pressure then turned into a firm discontinuing of Thorpe's salary in May 1996. "Go get a job, Marc," Pinney said to Thorpe. This didn't stop him working on Robot Wars. Personal loans and credit cards kept him afloat during this time. Confident that soon enough, his vision would pay off. Virgin Interactive, the game company that produced the Earthworm Jim games in Europe, had shown interest in the Robot Wars video game and had offered to pay Thorpe in a 3-year option. And toy companies like Hasbro and Tyco were also interested in the Robot Wars concept. Additionally, the BBC had started getting majorly interested in Mentor to create 6 pilot episodes of Robot Wars. It seemed like it was only a matter of time before profits really started to roll in. Marc just needed to hold on. Steve Plotnicki, however, didn't see it that way. The loans to Thorpe kept getting higher and higher. He'd had enough. "Don't spend any more money on Robot Wars. I know you all love it, but it's my money. I won't do anything more until it's resolved," he told Pinney and other employees of Profile. Lawyers of both sides had their own battles through letters. Profile's lawyer suggested a company where Plotnicki had 45% of the share and Thorpe 44%. Thorpe's lawyer rejected the proposal, saying, "It is necessary to find a method by which Marc can be relieved of the worries that he has in being a minority shareholder." Any ideas that Thorpe had for expanding the Robot Wars idea were rejected straight away by Plotnicki on the basis that it was too expensive. Any idea shown to Pinney was then shown to Plotnicki, which was then rejected. Eventually, Plotnicki would talk directly to Thorpe. "How much do you want, Marc? How much do you want for 30%? I want you to think about what you would accept for a certain percentage." To which Thorpe would reply, "I'm not going to give up my share of control, Steve." Often it would blow over with Thorpe holding the phone away from his head while Plotnicki screamed at the other end. Neither one was going to give up their position easily. Pinney has suggested that Thorpe try find new investors for Robot Wars, and that led him to Bob Leppo, a man who would take risky bets in the stock markets and saw something in Robot Wars when he was shown tapes of previous events. And before Thorpe knew it, Leppo had agreed to invest in Robot Wars. When asked about Bob Leppo helping him, Thorpe had this to say: "Steve totally misjudged every key person that helped me. Bob just wanted me to make a deal, saying even a bad deal is better than no deal. In this case, I did not agree. Steve sees everyone as a threat because that is New York business." You would think it would be as simple as that, right? Bob Leppo invests in Robot Wars, and then everything's fine, right? Sadly not. When negotiating the details to Plotnicki, Plotnicki said that any percentage of the company that he bought would come directly from Thorpe's share. Plotnicki didn't like the idea of another partner of a company who was an ally to Thorpe. Leppo might not have bought any shares, but he gave Thorpe a loan which he used to hire an attorney and fund the next event. If that loan had never been given, Robot Wars 1997 would have never happened. Pinney found out about Robot Wars 1997 and wasn't exactly happy about it, but Thorpe insisted that it couldn't have been a surprise. Pinney had found out that Thorpe had bought insurance, rented the Fort Mason Center, and got a production company to provide lights and sound. Plotnicki saw this as a violation of the joint venture agreement, which had stated all decisions in the Robot Wars venture were to be made jointly by both parties. And before he knew it, Thorpe was hit, nay, slapped, nay, absolutely T-boned with a lawsuit. The black hole had been formed, and Thorpe was already in the event horizon. Many of the Roboteers who planned to participate in the 1997 competition wrote to the judge who would consider the injunction. Dan Danknick, who built Agamemnon, had a letter with $31,247 written in a huge font stating that this is the amount of money I will stand to lose if you cancel or delay the Robot Wars 1997 competition in San Francisco. For once, a community that only met once a year in San Francisco was unifying in one motivation: to compete.
We were just old school, a bunch of friends getting together and smashing robots together. I had been doing this since I was like 10 years old. So,
I think one thing is kind of important to realize here, unlike musicians or whatever, this was nobody's job. Nobody was doing this to earn money. They were, in fact, spending lots of their money to build these robots and have them destroyed, all right? So it was entirely voluntary. It was entirely creative motivation. It wasn't like musicians trying to break into the business at all. And I think that's back to Marc's point, that Plotnicki didn't understand the group of people, the community that Marc had built that he was dealing with. You know, it was his, I don't know, aesthetic or his, integrity that drove a lot of people, to spend so much time doing this. It wasn't just a business or a competitive endeavor. It was almost an artistic endeavor, right?
It was.
Collectively by many people, So, and Marc was, the originator and the face of that.
Profile went as far to get a lawyer to post on the Robot Wars website saying the event might be cancelled due to legal troubles. But Thorpe was adamant that the competition was going to happen, stating, "For the record, I have done nothing wrong and I believe Robot Wars 97 has every right to go forward." He gave the Roboteers the address to the New York court in the hopes that they would write something to them. Dozens of letters poured in, and soon enough, Plotnicki and Thorpe were called into court in August 1997, only 2 weeks before the competition was going to be staged. The judge was initially not happy with either party when Thorpe brought up the comment that Plotnicki allegedly made about bankrupting him. Thorpe believes that during a conference call with attorneys from both sides, according to his attorney at the time, Bill Scherer, Plotnicki said, "I will pursue him past bankruptcy and destroy him and his family." Thorpe understandably took that as a genuine threat. The judge agreed that the money that had accumulated within 4 years was a lot, and Plotnicki felt he was giving Thorpe what was essentially blank checks. But Thorpe's lawyer rebutted. "Yes, they are the wallet. Don't deny that for the moment. But they want to take away Mr. Thorpe's control. And Mr. Thorpe says absolutely not." The judge agreed. "You can't give them carte blanche to take Mr. Thorpe's idea and turn it into something that is totally foreign, harmful or denigrating to the concept that he has developed for them to make money." After a lot of back and forths, the judge had had enough and said to both parties, "I want you to go to lunch together. I want you to talk. You both have very valid propositions, but that and a subway token, without more, is going to get you out of this courtroom and up to Midtown together. You have to work with each other." Thorpe didn't want that to happen, but the judge was no longer listening. Thorpe, Plotnicki, and the lawyers of both parties made their way into the jury room. For better or for worse, there is no record of the 120-minute discussion that took place then, but it was described by both parties as emotional and angry, similar to the phone calls that Thorpe and Plotnicki had before the hearing. Except they were face to face, both parties screaming at each other to the point where they both lost their voices. However, they had worked out an interim agreement, just for the 1997 event. Profile had sold Thorpe a $1 license to hold the event at the Fort Mason Center. For now, Thorpe thought he had won the court battle to hold robotic battles. It seemed like, for now at least, they could breathe. Robot Wars 1997 came and went with little or no hitches on a legal level. You can hear more about the Robot Wars 1997 competition in a bonus video that I'm going to make straight after this. But that event was merely just an intermission for the bigger battle raging on in the courtrooms. Profile's lawyers had drawn up new papers and Thorpe felt what he agreed on had been changed in a subtle way. Specifically, a provision which stated that should the LLC not pay back all the money that Profile had loaned, they would foreclose on the Robot Wars assets. In December 1997, Thorpe and Plotnicki thought they had come to an agreement. Thorpe sold his interest for $250,000 for a 10% royalty with a license to put on 2 events each year in the United States. However, the license was only limited to toys and games, and Thorpe thought it meant royalties on all merchandise. This, along with other reasons, led to Thorpe, once again, not signing. Despite not signing, he asked the judge to get Profile to issue a license so that Robot Wars 1998 would go ahead. The judge refused, as she didn't want to keep the joint venture agreement going. "There is no forum currently known to the modern judicial system which can assist these parties in signing a final agreement," the judge said. Not even appeal could help him out, as a 3-judge panel denied him permission to stage Robot Wars 1998. Time was really starting to be of the essence. If the 1998 competition was going to happen, it had to happen quickly. In the next settlement meeting, Thorpe offered to buy Profile's share of the business for $500,000. Plotnicki, however, wasn't convinced. "With whose money?" he said. In comes Trey Roski. Trey had offered to help Thorpe after his previous attorney was about to leave the case. Having no money to hire a new one, He asked Roski if he could help. The answer was a resounding yes.
Yeah, I know, I've dealt with Trey, and since the very beginning, kind of as a friend, as a competitor, and then with BattleBots, Trey is just legit. The current term for Trey.
By this point, the impact of the court case had taken a physical, emotional, and mental toll. When I asked him about the court case affecting him from a mental and physical perspective, he wrote a simple one-word answer. Devastating. And it was. Thorpe, Bob Lepo, and Trey Roski attended the latest meeting as usual, but a new face would join in the meeting with them. Ed Roski, Trey Roski's son, also attended the meeting and wanted to help, even with Trey's advice saying, "Nobody gets involved in someone's lawsuit." And he became the newest member in Thorpe's attempts to break the deadlock with Plotnicki. Marc used his newly conceived alliance with Trey Roski to hopefully put a business partnership together and use that business to get licenses to host events in the future. But Plotnicki, once again, wasn't buying it. He started to become suspicious. Why is someone who is struggling financially suddenly fighting for control with tooth and nail? In the spring of 1998, Plotnicki's lawyers deposed Trey Roski and Bob Lepo, with the former declaring that he just wanted to compete. "I'm in second place right now, so I have vengeance to get back at someone, and now they're not even going to let me play." The options were getting slimmer and slimmer as the days and weeks rolled by. All Thorpe wanted to do was get out of the agreement and never have to do business with Plotnicki ever again. This is where the option of Chapter 11 bankruptcy came in, which would allow anyone filing for said bankruptcy to be able to dissolve detrimental contracts without the fear of continued litigation. And so, that is exactly what Marc Thorpe did. I asked Marc on how well he rated his chances of being able to sever ties with Plotnicki at the time, to which he replied, "Much better than they actually were in hindsight."
It was this elaborate plan. Well, it was the reason why I filed for bankruptcy, apart from the financial pressures, was that it allowed certain things, like the venue being in Santa Rosa instead of New York. Stuff like that, which are significant.
The next line of duty, urged by Bob Lepo, was to email everyone on the Robot Wars mailing list and let them know what was going on, as the deadline for Robot Wars 1998 was closing in, and not a single bit of info was spilt since the last competition. We are still trying to come to an agreement, but Profiles refused to allow me to move forward with the event unless the final documents are signed. That arrangement continues to be unacceptable to me due to the number of unresolved issues and the time required to resolve them. And, besides, no one benefits by the cancellation of the event in any case. I have worked far too hard and far too long and far too much personal sacrifice to be bullied into submission by a wealthy businessman and his clever attorneys. Also, I am not one to succumb to tactics of coercion and intimidation. Thankfully, few have suggested I do. And, fortunately, a few individuals have helped me in ways that simple gratitude cannot address. I believe that the strategy is as follows. He knows that the bigger Robot Wars gets, the higher the value becomes, and the more difficult it will be for him to get control. He might not ever get control if Robot Wars were financially prosperous, so lately he has been doing all he can to avoid deals and opportunities and is generally withholding approval for everything, including Robot Wars 98. He has some hollow excuses, but the reality is as obvious as an elephant in a kitchen. Keep the faith. You build, I'll fight. A month passed without much trouble, but what would happen next made the biggest shockwaves within the early Robot Wars community. Carlo Bertoncini discovered the Delphi forum's website and created the Robot Wars forum, intending it to be a way to talk about tactics and technical know-how. What originally started as a forum post on how to beat Blendo then quickly changed into the elephant in the room, Robot Wars 1998, and whether or not it would go ahead. What started as just meetings every few days in August at the Fort Mason Center changed into a bustling online community. Little did they know, the attorneys at Profile Records were also watching. Delphi was sent a letter by Plotnicki's attorney asking if they could discontinue the use of the Robot Wars trademark on the forums, and agreed to acknowledge that the trademark was owned by Robot Wars LLC. This didn't make a difference as he didn't feel obliged to change the name, stating, "Any more than the Evening News is obliged to state that they don't own the MFL. The business of Delphi depends on the ability of us each to exercise our First Amendment rights. I'm sure your attorney will not want to set a precedent of kowtowing to any yahoo that comes along and threatens to sue." Plotnicki's attorney responded, insisting that the name should be changed to an unofficial forum on Robot Wars events. Carlo wasn't budging. "I know of no legal precedent that requires the owner of a web page to place certain words in a certain prescribed locations on their page. Our disclaimer is clearly visible, and as such, I think it satisfies any requirements for the disclosure of the nature of the forum." Plotnicki then called Marc Thorpe, hoping he would get Bertoncini to get a license to operate the forum. "Carlo can do whatever he wants," he replied, clearly having enough of Plotnicki's continued threats. The robot fighting community would then write emails to the current judge of the case in a collective sign of solidarity, with Roboteer Adam Clark stating in an email, "Profile might stop the event, but they can't stop the combat." At that same time, Plotnicki had suspected that an alternative competition might be held in the near future. He would then write on the Robot Wars forum, "I've tried to refrain from writing to you because, despite Marc Thorpe's attempts to make our dispute public, it's a private commercial dispute that cannot be solved by anyone but the two of us. We foresaw the day that you could turn Biohazard, La Machine, or the Master, as well as other robots, into household names like the Ninja Turtles, or other great action characters. Secondly, Marc promised to give us additional shares in the company for the money that we put in beyond our original investment. As part of our agreement, Marc would continue to hold the San Francisco event. We thought all the issues were resolved, but then came the messy part. Marc refused to sign the documents that reflected what he had agreed to, even though Marc had received the benefit of using our money, including putting nearly $100,000 in his own pocket. It turned out that all along he was leading us on, making promises that he wasn't going to keep. To further aggravate things, he arranged to hold Robot Wars 97 behind our backs. We were left with little choice but to bring litigation against him. At this point, the only way Robot Wars can be held is if Marc and I come to terms. We believe that the court will see through any attempt to violate its order and will take the appropriate actions. If that happens, it would be unfortunate for an innocent third party to be caught in the middle. Marc has known for a very long time that we would not consent to hold another Robot Wars event until we had reached an agreement. That was it. The pin had been dropped and the opportunity of a new robot fighting competition was stopped in its tracks immediately. Except that wasn't what Gary Klein had thought. The Spunky Monkey creator wanted to help Thorpe and called him about staging a new event, but Thorpe replied that if it were to happen, he couldn't be involved in it, directly or indirectly. Klein would then use that idea to conceive a new robot fighting competition, Robotica. Before anyone knew it, the competition was starting to gather weight, with Dan Dagnick picking up 1,200 pounds of polycarbonate plastic to create an arena. $15,000 of Gary Klein's own money had been spoon-fed into the competition, renting out the Cow Palace in San Francisco. It was looking like the spiritual successor and the solution to an increasingly complex problem. However, Gary Klein had made a few mistakes. The most glaring being that he made a "Guess Who's Coming to Robotica" list on his own website and added both Marc Thorpe and Trey Roski, along with posting freely on the Delphi forums about the competition, which by now was a snooper's paradise for profile records attorneys. So what happens next? Will Robotica work out, or will the watching eyes of Profile Records snap it in two? And will the UC Davis graduate, known to us as Marc Thorpe, be able to break the deadlock that has him and his creation in an absolute chokehold? How will robot fighting as a sport survive at such a turbulent time? Time is ticking, the builders are waiting, and the future of this amazing sport hangs in the balance. What is lurking between those double doors, and what will be the fate of Robot Wars? Find out next time. Next time on the Robot Wars Retrospective, the conclusion to the Thorpe vs. Profile Records lawsuit.
with interviews from the man himself, plus Mike Winter and Will Wright.